London Mayor Sadiq Khan is back on his old hobby horse. He wants to starve my government to give him the powers to introduce rent controls in the capital. Let's imagine he gets his way. What would be the likely result of that? What would London look like with a rent control policy in place? Fortunately, we don't have to speculate. Rent controls have been tried many times before. We have literally hundreds of examples from all over the world. And their outcomes have been extensively studied and researched by economists. So what have they come up with? What do we know? One of the world's leading experts on the subject is Dr. Konstantin Kholodolin from the German Institute of Economic Research, the DIW. He has conducted what is probably the most comprehensive review of the economic literature on this subject to date. And he summarizes his findings in his new IEA paper, Rent Control. Does it work? The details differ hugely from study to study, but the general direction does not. There are a number of results that keep coming up again and again across time and place. Namely, rent controls reduce the supply of rental housing. Rent controls reduce the quality of rental housing. Rent controls reduce mobility among private renters. Rent controls reduce housing construction. Rent controls lead to a less efficient allocation of the housing stock. And while rent controls reduce rents in those parts of the housing market where they apply, they also lead to increases in housing costs elsewhere in the housing market. A good recent example is Berlin's rent price freeze from about 4 years ago. It did reduce rents, but within just 1 year, the supply of rental properties coming on the market dropped by almost half, at a time when it increased in comparable cities. If London adopted a similar scheme, there is no reason why the results should be any different, except in one respect. Berlin got lucky because the German Federal Constitutional Court had the power to strike down the rent price cap, and it did. If Sadiq Khan got his way, we would not have an equivalent mechanism to stop him. At the opposite end of the policy spectrum, we have the example of Argentina, where President Milei has recently scrapped rent controls and supply immediately shot up. It's important to note that the alternative to rent controls is not to do nothing. It is not to accept the status quo. It's to massively expand the supply of housing across the board, whether that is for renting, buying, or other purposes. That is the only measure that can truly help tenants. Sadiq Khan already has the powers to do a lot of that. He just chooses not to use them.